you. Are you a human? Are you sick or just sick of things? Ask your doctor to prescribe new, longer-lasting pseudophthormachronophyll today. Side effects may include external bowel syndrome, leaky fingers, bone loss, hair growth, hair loss, desucification, numeracy, eye reversal, organ mobility, genital multiplication, sanguinity, passive aggression, impersonal crisis syndrome, marrow-filled dilapidation, thrombosis, and sentient tumors.
Hello, humans. This is your host, Alien, joined today by my two friends, Tiger.
Hello.
And Not Robot.
ART. All right, team. Go, go, go. Yay.
We will rock you. And yes, that's right. Today, we are talking about sports, folks. Human sports. What a wonderful topic. So, let's just dive right into it. To me, I feel like human sports is a slightly systematized extension of the type of play that human children do with each other. Discuss amongst yourselves.
Not just human children play, almost every type of animal. I don't know if fish play, but at least mammals tend to play as a learning mechanism. And humans in their default state use play as a learning mechanism, but in the current state, they use repetition and punishment and conformity to learn, which doesn't seem as effective, but doesn't stop most of the world from doing that. So is school a really broken, bad sport?
I like that analogy.
Because there's scores, right? You can get 0 to 100 points in most subjects, at least the way they used to do it. A lot of them do other stuff like pass, fail, or apparently in a lot of universities now, grades are discrimination, so just everybody passes.
Delightful.
It's the game where everybody wins. You scored a goal, great. They win too.
I feel like there's a bit of a paradox there. If everybody wins, then nobody wins. So does everybody just lose at that game?
Shh. See, I think they've done something right in the wrong direction. So if a sport is a balance between playfulness and structure, like rigor, right? That different games balance somewhere between those things. And sport is a more narrow range. Education, as it has been in the West recently anyway, is far more rigor-focused and less play-focused. One way to move towards play would be to eliminate scores, but you can't just eliminate scores to move towards play. Does that make sense to either of you?
It makes sense. I especially like the spectrum that you brought up for that. This also brings up a question, which is, what is the distinction between a game and a sport? Because you could say that all sports are games, but not all games are sports. So what is it about sports that makes them specifically different from games? And I think competition could be seen as one of them, but I don't think it is the only difference.
Well, they have international chess championships, and chess isn't a sport. I think the difference is most games that are not sports are generally, so say you talk about board games or card games, they are generally minimally physical, and that is the main definition there. There's things like kids games where you might be playing a game of tag, where I think the biggest difference between that and a sport is there's no end state. It's an open-ended game, whereas all sports are closed. There is some finite way of measuring we are done. Instead of tag, it goes until we're bored or we're tired or someone fell down, got hurt, and now we're trying to find someone to blame it on or whatever.
Or the dinner bell rang.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking timers. Would a timed game of tag be a closed system?
I suppose then you could have it as a sport, and then I'm not sure exactly how you measure victory. Perhaps whoever got tagged the least.
There is a international sport tag, but it's single rounds. So there is one person who is it and one person who is running away, and they have a timer. The person running away, if they evade for the entire time, they have won. If they get tagged, they have lost. So there is more rigor, more constraint, and I think the end state and the physicality is what makes the subset or the particular rigor that the sports form of game is. I agree.
So sports are more confined and closed than other games.
And they have particular confinements because They are a physical game that has a winner and a loser.
And I think the physicality is also for me especially, one of the defining aspects of a sport, in that it is all activities are physical to a certain degree, but it's a athletic game that is being played. For chess, you are moving your hands, but a game of football, or as they call it in certain parts of the world, soccer.
Is that discrimination against females? Shouldn't you sock him too? That seems to have an implicit, like, gender-based violence to it.
Yeah, I went to high school. Yeah, I was won a medal in sock him. That's a good one.
I think they call that boxing.
Very good sport too.
Maybe that's what they called it. So maybe it used to be you beat both genders, but people kept on getting confused with sock him and boxing, and so they changed the name of both. So sock him became football or boxing, depending on.
I wonder if
you should check the history on that.
Yeah.
I wonder if this has something to do with the English language, where you used to have weremen and women, and then weremen just got turned into man, but man meant something else before. I wonder if that was around the same time when soccer and sock him split.
I'm not sure soccer was invented at that point.
I'm sure humans have always been kicking stuff around, usually the heads of their fallen enemies.
It's hard to kick a severed head as often as they kick a ball in soccer.
This is true, and they're usually not trying to kick it through a goal.
And sometimes they use the whole body of a fallen opponent to kick through the goal, like in the Mayan ball game.
One of my favorite things. I loved participating in those.
You got to play some in their heyday?
Yeah, I've been the referee, I've been the players, I've been the victim, though that ended different than normal, because I'm still here, obviously. But, oh man, I had so much fun just teleporting down from my ship, getting a few beers for everybody, just getting them all drunk and then playing that game. Oh man, those were the good old days. Humans, you know how you have that person who always dreams of, like, his or her good old days in high school? That was mine.
Back when you're first learning about the humans, and there was a mix of excitement and youthful energy and ignorance.
Exactly.
Sounds a lot like high school.
Yeah. Fun fact, I wasn't sent here to study humans, too. I was actually sent here to study fungus. The humans just kind of became a cool side project of mine.
Huh. So are you still studying fungus, and this is just your hobby?
It's kind of been a case of my hobby has slowly turned into my shadow career, and my shadow career has now turned into my main career, to use human metaphors. But we will talk about that in another episode, the Q&A. You can ask questions then.
Well, as long as we're going back to Mayan times, how about we start with the origin of sports? Like, where did humans get this idea to sport?
I think that's probably been lost in the mist of history. I don't think either me or Alien have been around long enough to have any speculation on that, because it's almost like asking where's the origin of a culinary tradition. Everybody's always eaten. Everybody's always played, but at some point, people were like, this is the better way to play. This is the better way to eat. And whether that happened the first time people talked about what it was to play, I think that would be a hard one to answer.
Well, I think sport, if I was to guess, because as Tiger said, I was not here in the very early days of humanity, sport probably has an origin in practice. I imagine just sort of looking at early sports that were going on around the Bronze Age era, it seems like it came out of what were sort of hunting practices, fighting practices, so human clans or towns or civilizations going to war with each other. It seems like sport was sort of something that came out of practice, but took on a entertainment aspect and or a play aspect. If you want to wonder where sport came from, it usually comes out of some form of practice that has been funified.
Or separated from the thing you are practicing for. So say you go back to the Olympics and you have running, which is useful because you have runners who, before you have stirrups, and in terrain where...
And horses big enough to hold humans.
Right. Back in the chariot age, there's terrain where a chariot doesn't work, which might include phalanxes, trying to navigate your chariot through a phalanx. You have people who are specifically runners, especially in Greece, it's mountainous. And so you're like, I want you to go and send a message over there. you go run a marathon to go deliver a message to Marathon about this battle that's going on. So then you've got running, and then you have throwing javelins, which there's a whole cohort literally of people in the Greek military that are javelineers who throw javelins. And then you have wrestling, which is if you lose your weapon, then you're probably going to be wrestling for a short while till you or your opponent dies. So those all kind of make sense. And in Rome, ancient Rome, there was chariot racing, which seems to be kind of a legacy of, I wonder if they stole that from Greece, because I don't think the Romans really used chariots in their military. So that must have been stolen from Greece or something.
Not the Olympic games, but the similar games in Athens definitely had chariot racing, because there are vases depicting that in Athens.
Chariot racing in ancient Rome kind of could have been something like the Formula One racing competition that modern humans do, where there isn't much of a practical point to drive a sports car that recklessly and that fast, but it's still a cool, fun thing to do.
And then if you go back to, like, if you want to jump continents, lacrosse comes from an American Indian game that originally apparently was a lot more violent than it is now, where you'd have sticks and stones and you'd be hitting the stone around and occasionally whacking each other, trying to get the stone somewhere, depending on your variant of it. And that seems to in some ways emulate a battle, because you have a set of, I don't know, say 30 warriors who are out there whacking each other with sticks. I wonder how much of that is an early attempt to find a way of asserting some sort of dominance in a way that wasn't marching over the hill and stabbing people with spears.
Well, in some ways, I think the Greek Olympics were like that, where if a city-state in Greece came to the Olympics and they're like, hey, look at our javelin throwers, look how they take all the top medals. It's kind of them dabbing, to use the phrase that modern children use. It's sort of them dabbing on their opponents, being like, or flexing, I think is a better word to use.
Teabagging?
Teabagging. It's sort of them teabagging the other city-states, being like, hey, look how good our javelin throwers are, don't mess with us. You kind of have dominance, assertion, playfulness, and practice bundled up into one activity.
So what about things like Kuju? The first game that I played with humans was a traditional Chinese ball sport that has died out, sadly, because it's a good time, though fairly challenging. And it's something like if you mixed hacky sack and soccer. Some of the later versions were more like hacky sack and bocce, but I played back in, my early days with humans, so it was more like you had to keep a ball off the ground. You couldn't touch it with your hands, and you were trying to put it in a zone. You have, 7 of your friends around you helping you do that, and you have 8 opponents trying to stop you or, get it in their own goal. What sort of practical application does that evoke for you?
Well, I feel like the Chinese have a long history, and especially around the time period of your youth, where they have a lot of focus on sort of bodily cultivation, in that their martial arts practices, Tai Chi, which is sort of one of the defining... Tai Chi is kind of its own separate thing, but it's a defining aspect of Chinese culture, in my view. These are all practices to cultivate a strong, flexible, and I mean flexible not just in terms of like muscular flexibility, but a well-balanced, strong body. And I feel like it can involve doing certain tasks that, while they seem like something you would never do in practical day-to-day life, they are very helpful in developing things that will help you in practical day-to-day life. So kicking, kneeing a ball around without touching your hands and trying to get it through a hoop might not be something you ever do normally as a human, but it will make it easier for you to walk. It will make you better balanced. When you become older, you're less likely to fall over and injure yourself. So it has practical benefits, even if the practical benefits aren't the thing you're doing.
I wonder if that is in part a legacy from the East in general, having a longer, more continuous stretch of civilization. Whether you're in India or China, they essentially have been in broad terms, the same civilization for thousands of years, back when people in the West were still running around and whacking each other with clubs, they had something like states and government. And so I wonder if that led to a bit more introspection. Like, it seems like sports in the West, like boxing and javelin throwing and whatever, are much more external focused. They're about showing off and look at me and go team. Whereas in the East, you don't have competitive yoga. Like, let's get together 5.
But you do have polo.
Right. And that's kind of from the steppe lands, the Mongol hordes and whatever, which can use military. I mean, you're riding around with a big hammer whacking usually someone's severed head in a sack around. So that's horse skill. I mean, you can still use that as a practical, battlefield skill. But it seems like yoga, some forms of martial arts, like, say, qigong or something, there's games in the East that seem much more detached from a practical use than in the West. And I wonder if that is from them having enough time that they're civilized that gave them time to go, well, let's do something that isn't practical. Let's do it just because we can.
Well, related to increased stability amongst those civilizations, part of the reason why those civilizations have been historically so stable is because they're more geographically isolated. And I would say that there are more isolated cultures in general. And I would say that isolated cultures in general tend to be more inward focused and less outward focused in terms of the subtle psychologies of the individual humans and of the cultures that you see in those areas. So those sports, or lack thereof sports, however way you want to look at it, is a reflection of that more inward-looking psychology.
So then, jumping ahead, so now we've gone to the beginning, it's interesting to see the role that sports play now. And it seems like the primary function is either advertising for universities or kind of indulging in broad spectrum tribalism. You can pick a team. Say you pick the 48ers, the 50ers,
something like that.
Something like that. You pick a number and slap an ers at the end. So the 3ers or something. So you have the 3ers that are your favorite sports ball team, and you can find a community, much in the way in Native American cultures they used to have the Elk Clan. And you might be Cherokee Elk Clan, or you might be Georgian Elk Clan. And if you traveled, you could stay at an Elk Clan lodge. Like, wherever you went in North America, there were these tribes within tribes that were your people, even if you didn't speak the same language. And so same thing, you could be a big fan of the 48ers or the 3ers or whatever, or the Buffaloes, or I don't know, whatever they name their team after, some number or animal or something. And if you go to the other side of the world, you might happen to run into another person that's a Buffalo fan or a 48ers fan. And instantly you have a connection because there's an us against, the 50ers, they suck and we hate them. Or those Buffaloers, they're the worst.
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned back in the religion episode about how you have the modern phenomena of secularization. As I've said before, secularization is where the culture's religious rituals and ideals are transferred into the realm of politics and sports. So sports in modern human history have a very quasi-religious aspect to them, or sort of mainstream religion supplementation aspect to them. So whereas people used to go to church on Sundays, now they go to the Super Bowl on Sundays.
I think sports are almost always religious to some degree or another. If you look at the Popol Vuh, is a creation story about 2 or 3 ball games, depending on how you count it. Or like the Olympics has an origin story with the gods playing games and Apollo beating everyone.
Speaking of religion in the Olympics, I've always been very disappointed by the fact that the Vatican City, even though it's an independent country, never participates in the Olympics.
Never sends people to compete in the Olympics?
Yeah, like who doesn't want to see a cardinal do a high jump or something? Or have them like do wrestling. They do wrestling in the Olympics, right?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think so. They certainly used to.
Maybe that's how they should elect popes from now on.
I feel like that would be a very different religion very quickly.
Not a bad thing.
So, as you were saying,
Or Lunasa, or any number of religious festivals that are the occasion for sports being played. And that is how and when you do, or even trials by combat, or small combats to decide larger problems, like in the Iliad, when a hero from each side comes together for a contest that will decide important things for the war. That's sort of like a sport. It's certainly leaning on that, greater in the outcome. Maybe there's a third axis: play, outcome dependent, and rigor, because it is less rigorous than like an MMA, which is interesting. Anyway, but the humans regard them as divinely ordained and as valid communication from gods. And I don't think, even in the secularized world, or maybe because of the secularized world, the religious aspects of sport are minimized in some ways, even if they might be exaggerated in others.
Well, it's good that you brought up the ritualistic aspect of sports, because I think that is a good point to bring in as well. How you have play, you have practice, you have competition, but then you have a fourth, we're using different axes of comparison, we have a fourth axis of ritual. And human rituals, its own subject of its own that we'll have to discuss someday as well.
and it seems like, in brief, to avoid going off entirely on rituals are a way of, in some ways, bringing authority or credibility to a thing. It's certain things you wear or do or consume, or certain behaviors you enact to give special, out of the ordinary significance to the event. So if you painted your face half red and half white and walked down the street, maybe less today than 20 years ago, people would look at you strangely. And if you went back further than that, if you were, say, 50 years ago, you might be arrested or something, or at least get a stern talking to.
And then if you went back 200 years from there, it would be considered perfectly normal.
Right. Depending on where and when you were. But that ritual of putting on a garment that represents the player you favor, or the team, the 48ers jersey or whatever, then you do that, and then you have the food, which might be food you normally eat, but there's a special like mini feast of, we're going to roast some hot dogs on the grill and drink some brewskis, and we're going to do that in a way that we do other times, but now it's special. Like, we have twice as many hot dogs and 5 times as many rounded, deep fat fried potato slices and all of that.
And you might be doing it out of the back of a car.
Right. When normally those conveyances aren't used as banquet tables, but for this instance, everyone has their own transport/banquet tables, and then there's this commingling of you with your fellows rooting for the same sports ball team to have victory and thus validate your existence.
Which I think is a very valuable thing for humans to do that they don't get as much of as they ought to in modernity, of festivity and frivolity and
Community,
indeed. But in that festive sense of community, not the go to work and see the people you see every day sense of community.
right.
There's also, even though it's ritualistic, there's a certain degree of spontaneity that comes with it. Where living amongst humans, I feel like humans are almost less robotic, less non-human, and more human when they're engaging in these rituals and festivals. Even though the rituals and festivals are by their own definition, ritualistic and calculated thing. And I think this also brings up another point, which is, when it comes to sports, the difference between participating in a sport and observing a sport, or being a spectator of a sport. And I feel like the latter, being a spectator, is something that has grown significantly in recent time. I don't know if it's simply just because of human communication technology has improved. It allows more people to become spectators than they would have in the past, instead of going traveling to and hanging out at a stadium. You can watch the stadium remotely. But in the past, there was more of a equal balance between spectatorship and direct sports participation.
I think that goes along with, like you said, communication media and the growing room for professionalism in sports because of communication media and because you can get more people paying a little bit into a system that pays out someone's living doing sport rather than maybe you're the best baseball player in your small town in 1910, but you're not going to be able to play baseball full time doing that
and afford your cans of whoop ass and everything.
Indeed.
Imagine you, instilled with the dangerous elegance of a tiger, prowling through the dark. The human crowd parts before you like the understory of the jungle. You catch her scent, and she catches yours. The hunt is just beginning, but you both know how it will end. Crimson Roll. Scent of power and confidence. Available now. Visit tigermusk.com to order your bottle or find a retailer near you. Crimson Roll, because you deserve to roll.
And that's an interesting transition to now the best sports players in the world are in the probably top fraction of a percent, at least as far as income. And if they manage it well, that can quickly result in top fraction of a percent in wealth as well. But the incomes that some sports players make can be the equivalent of, you might make in one season what 1,000 people make in a year. And that's, I think, a fascinating shift in that if you're doing this thing that children do and you get good enough at it, then you can make stupidly more than someone who creates a business that employs 1,000 people or someone who invents something. And so it's almost this worship of these cults of team and individual personality. So if you are the best player, you're the, what do they call it, a 10th back or a 1/8 back or something?
Something like that.
Yeah, so you're a 10th back and you're the best 10th back in the whole sports league, then people will say your name with reverence and you can command salaries that corporate CEOs would wish they had.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the simultaneous celebrification of being a good athlete, but also just, as you said, the immense amount of monetary income that they can take in. And it's kind of curious. I want to hear your opinion on this, Tiger in particular. Do you feel that this mass giving of money to and attention and worship of these athletes is something that is okay, well earned on their part, or do you feel it's almost human culture committing idolatry by trying to deify these athletes?
Well, I have no problem with idolatry or deifying living people, but I would say it's emblematic of larger problems of modernity redistributing ease and material resources around the world.
Do you feel like it's that modern humanity en masse is almost exporting their physical athleticism to other people and then sort of living it as a distant fantasy? It's kind of like pornography, where like instead of me having sex, I can just watch other people have sex and it's way easier and it's free. I mean, sex is free as well, but it's easier.
Potentially, I think that there are larger issues as to why modern humans are not as athletically capable as they might be otherwise. More to do with food and health systems than sports systems, but it might play some role.
Hey, Robot, there's a light on the back of your head. It's yellow and blinking. It says RAM overload.
Yes, I'm generating some pictures and running some statistical analysis. So hopefully, listeners, you don't mind that this is 0.17% of my executive function is dedicated to this podcast presently. So if you notice any falterations or errors more than usual, then blame me trying to generate some art and dollars.
Where were we?
On a ramble somewhere.
On a ramble somewhere. When are we not?
So I wonder about that. I've never thought of that before, Alien, with that vicarious physicality. I wonder if it's one of the reasons, too, that MMA is so popular now as well, especially for both of those. Most of Western culture seems to be suppressing masculinity or the features of masculinity in culture, like competitiveness and competition as far as meritocracy, where the male version of most male societies is the best person for the job gets the job, because if you go way back, because you're stronger, tougher, bigger, and you can make it that way. And that seems to be something that has been, for good or ill, repressed. And wars have been suppressed by the U.S. military being so dominant, and the U.S., at least for now, being willing to pay for the U.S. military to make everybody stop fighting each other for the large part. And so that battlefield chunk of male psyche gets channeled into sports and watching these hyper-athletic and in MMA, hyper-violent people expressing that inner male need or desire or testosterone-fueled drive to achieve, strive, dominate, become victorious, fight, prevail, all of that.
I mean, there's a lot that I could go into there, especially having observed human history for so long. Warfare and combat, I think I'm going to have to leave that aside because I could talk for hours about that separately. I feel it's definitely the case that, like, modern civilization is sort of discussing with a human who was wanting to do an interview. He was one of those, like, alien chasers. Anyways,
ufologists or something?
Yeah, he was damn good. He followed me and he actually discovered my identity. And I decided not to liquidate him on the spot and decided to give him an interview instead. And I told him, too, that, like, modern civilization is sort of like, you know, those crazy mothers who, like, drown their children or smother them to death when they're infants or something? It's kind of like what's happening in civilization right now. So you are right in that there's sort of that human male backlash. It's not the word I'm looking for, but you push down a spring and then you let go, it bounces back up.
Mm-hmm.
It's that kind
Rebound.
Yes, rebound. There's a bit of a rebound, and you could see the push towards those sports as sort of being an ability for these males who can't necessarily act this way publicly because they will be shamed or attacked and have their lives destroyed for doing so. But then they can kind of go underneath, and any group of people who, if you suppress them, will start acting in this way.
It sounds like there's some economic thinkers who said a bit of wisdom in that markets are inherently volatile things because the real utility in markets is price signals, sending signals about what is valuable and what is not. And in modern times, central banks, at the behest of politicians who want to get reelected, have been smothering volatility. They'll let the numbers go up as much as possible, but if it goes down too much, that's scary because the people in charge or in bed with, or whatever that sort of incestuous relationship is between bankers and politicians, the politicians say, I want to do this job again. But if numbers go down too much, people get unhappy and they'll vote for somebody else that will make better promises or lies or convince enough people that I make numbers go up. And so you better make numbers go up for me, or at least not go down for me. And that smothers volatility and the natural price signals, which means nowadays in most of the West, young people can't afford houses, and now a lot of times even cars. And the educations, a lot of people couldn't afford it unless the government provided for it, and they end up with something that is not valuable. And so by smothering all these price signals, it smothers volatility, the natural change in things. But volatility is entropy, and you can't suppress entropy. You can just redirect it. If I get too hot, I can't just not be hot. I have to turn on my heating fans and ventilate. And that's what that sound was earlier, is the ventilation fans coming on. So that volatility is there, and eventually it's going to come out somewhere. And if you repress financial volatility, eventually you get socio-political volatility, which, with all the shouts on social media about the right and the left and traitors and patriots and domestic terrorists and civil war and all that stuff in America, and ultra-nationalist right-wing parties coming into power and whatever populism rising, that is market volatility being suppressed. So I wonder if the suppression of females reached a point where eventually, when offered the chance to break out, then females, probably rightly so, said, we've had lifetimes of being repressed. It's our turn to take over, and like pendulums tend to do, it swings enough one way that now the men start to feel repressed. And that long tangent is to say perhaps sports is a temporary buffer to help soak up that male volatility that is being suppressed currently. And it gives it an outlet that, for a while, like most outlets, it has a tank that can absorb maleness, but eventually that tank is full up and it doesn't work anymore. And then that spills out, and then your maleness tank erupts, and then you have socio-political volatility.
So what I got away from that is sports is entropy.
Sports is an entropy sink.
Which
perhaps.
You want an entropy sink, because if you think about the concept of anti-fragility as opposed to fragility or even resilience, anti-fragility is being able to take your entropy and disperse it so evenly that it never erupts. You never have to worry about, man tanks blowing off here and there.
I've said it before, I will say it again. Patriarchy is a problem, but the problem is the archy, not the patri.
Right.
So we need patriarchy?
We just need anarchy.
Yes. It's like saying the answer to fascism is communism, or vice versa, is on either side pushing to the extreme. Or the answer to racism is racism against the people who are racist, or hating people who are hateful, or, in your example, the answer to patriarchy is matriarchy. That seems to be out of the frying pan and into a different frying pan, and you're ignoring the fire.
Indeed.
Speaking of fire, what are your favorite fire-related sports? It's not a sport, but I call it, because I love it so much, where they take the flaming torch and they just eat it. It's so cool to watch. I know it's not a competition, but I love it.
In some ways, it's a competition in the 0 to 1, do it wrong, and you burn your esophagus and die. So there is a loss condition. I don't know if there's a win condition, except that it's one of those infinite games where it goes on until the dinner bell rings, or in this case, your esophagus catches fire.
That brings me to a tangent that takes us back a little ways. You were talking about the audience component of sports, and the aspect that an audience adds to sport is to add a theatrical axis to the game. And theater, as a different sort of ritual as sport, is central to myth-making and to the things we've been talking about in the last few episodes. And it is interesting to see linking up the mythology and religion to theatrical and sports rituals. I don't know if this is going anywhere, but there's some related ideas bouncing around my head.
Well, I like this too, because now we've brought art into the aspect. How does art and sport overlap with each other?
Well, if you have theater and sport with an audience having a theatrical component, if you go to the theater and you know the play, aside from some sorts of spontaneous theater, improv, generally you know what's going to happen. And so it's not about trying to figure out what's going to happen. It's about the excellence of the stage and the quality of the vocal quality of the actors and their presence and presentation and variations they put on it. Like listening to music, you might go to a live concert and hear a song you've heard 1,000 times, but there's something ineffably different about being there while someone's spontaneously creating the music versus listening to your MP3, which is going to be identical every time you listen to it unless something breaks. So I wonder if sports in some way is theater, but there's a very prescribed set of scenes and acts that will happen. And most sports have like a 4-act structure or 2-act. And so there's different things expected depending on where you are in it. The teams or individual players will do different things depending on whether in the 4th act are you winning or in the 4th act are you losing. At the halftime party festival celebration thing, I imagine when they go away and their coaches inspire them like military leaders, what they're going to say is going to vary quite a bit depending on whether you have 4 goals or 0 goals. And so it is theater in a way. It's like man theater, like man ballet, except the ballerinas tackle each other.
That needs to be a thing, by the way. I'd like the idea of sport almost being like a theater where both the audience and the actors don't know how it's going to go. It's like, imagine if you went to Hamlet, but each time it was a complete mystery for the cast how the play was going to go. Like you might break out into Midsummer Night's Dream halfway through and then have it end
with
like
King Lear.
Yeah, or end like the play Hair.
Which is also, I think, why, in my experience, I would rather play an RPG than watch a movie. Because in the movie, there is a set story, and generally, even the first time watching it, you have some pretty good ideas of what's going to happen. But in a role-playing game, even if all of you together have a pretty specific idea of what is going to happen as you play the game, something completely different might happen because of your cards or tokens or counters or whatever your gaming system is. They might determine a different outcome than all of you had planned.
It makes me wonder if AI could create something like that where you have a movie that where you watch it, it's procedurally generated. That'd be an interesting idea. Not the same thing as an RPG for sure, but it's similar concept of spontaneous art, spontaneous theater.
Kind of like those books that are choose your own adventure books, except it's not pre-written. You make a choice and then the AI procedurally generates the next set of things to happen and then you pick.
And then you could make a sport watching 2 people do this and see who can get to the better outcome. I guess maybe that's more of a game because it's not terribly physical.
But then they have esports, which is an interesting side realm of you might be playing StarCraft or all these acronymized MOBA Dota things where you have individual players or teams that are playing video games, but for prizes and in tournaments, and you might have, I don't know what the number counts are, but thousands to perhaps millions of people watching remotely while you play this non-physical game.
I feel like for the purpose of our criterion, calling an esport a sport is a mild misnomer and advertising ploy, but that doesn't mean it's entirely wrong. It's just, it doesn't quite fit with how we defined sports at the beginning of this.
It's very
discussion.
blurry because it definitely plays into the competitive and ceremonial aspect of sport. But like you said, it really blurs between a sport and a game at that point. You are playing a game, but you're playing a game in a sports-like fashion. That's where I feel it sits.
But like a chess tournament.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I've had to think about. What is the difference between an e-sport and a chess game?
A chess game is in some ways more physical because you have to actually move your pieces around.
I feel like if you wanted to say why is an e-sport more sports-like than a chess, because e-sports generally, not all, but generally require a higher degree of physical reflexality than chess does. Chess is more strategic.
The real-time aspect.
Yes, most games, esports, have a very high pace of event, and you have to react very quickly.
In fact, in certain games that are called RTSs, they actually measure performance in clicks per second. And so someone might have a higher clicks per second rate, so they are favored, but the other person might be a more strategic player or be better with this team matchup or something. So there definitely is this strange physical mental hybridization.
They're almost like it's a sport of reflexes. It's like if you know the reflex test where you drop a a ruler and then you grab it. You know that test that humans do where they drop rulers and then they grab them to see how quick their reflexes are? It's like a really complex sport has been made out of that. So, because I agree with you, I don't agree with the bias of the amount of clicks someone does when they're playing an RTS. I don't think that's an accurate way you should be measuring a person's skill at RTS, because their skill at strategizing is what you're looking for. But it shows what these esports are generally aiming for because of that bias. The clicks per second is because they're really paying attention on, again, reflex and just speed of thought. A good example is that there was a game for a long period of time called Counter-Strike, and that's kind of, in one way, where the esport genre came out of. Genre as in like a style of esport, not an alien. Mm-hmm. It'd be strange if an alien entity emerged from that, but...
It'd be fascinating.
Yeah. Wonder what it would be like. Probably like CSGO. But in that video game, these humans have to have insanely high reflex capabilities to fight each other. Like, at the Olympics, you're dealing with the top 0.1% of physicality when it comes to things like sprinting, high jumping, gymnastics. In esports, you're dealing with the top 0.1% of reflex speed.
Matched with a cognitive ability to process what's happening when you're dealing with other people with that same reflex speed.
To process and then to also predict how the other people are going to act as well.
Yes.
I wonder when paintball is going to get accepted into the Olympics.
I will talk with the UN and petition for this because I want this to happen now that you've brought it up. And airsoft. I want to make airsoft part of the Olympics as well.
You probably could do one or the other. I'm not sure you need both.
I mean, airsoft's kind of paintball for wimps, so...
Maybe you could talk to a couple countries and they could host like a more real-life version of airsoft or paintball. Didn't they do that recently? Some place like Israel or Ukraine or something? Aren't they doing one of those tournaments right now?
Less soft.
Oh.
Yes, I feel that the Gaza team was very undertrained for this. They should not have gotten involved in this competition.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that'd be like approaching the Miami 50ers or whatever, and while they're doing warm-ups, you go and shoot a bunch of free throws, and you're like, I'm winning. And then they're like, no, now we're playing.
Or instead of shooting a bunch of free throws, you just shoot the players.
Right. But it turns out those players are all the IDF basketball team, and you get much more than you bargained for.
And then they start shooting back at you.
Right. Except they have tanks and artillery and... Yes.
Moral of the story, folks, don't start a gunfight at a Miami 50ers game or something.
Yes.
It will probably end badly.
Hello, humans. Do you take Tetraceuta-pharmacronophyll but are experiencing the nasty side effects? Try xenopharmapropine, guaranteed to remove up to 99.9999999% of side effects from Tetraceuta-pharmacronophyll. Now available over the counter at most corporate-owned super chain stores. Life is already difficult. Don't make it any harder on yourself. Side effects may include sleepiness, loss of appetite, increased sensitivity to light, weight loss, weightlessness, visions of the future, alexithymia, improvements in general mood, skin turning green, angina, perforated Mennings, alien birth syndrome, bouts of clarity, sexual attraction to tigers, erectile dysfunction, swelling of the tongue, depression, lower back pain, melena, dizziness, gonorrhea, and Stoneman disease. Do not take in combination with laxatives. You have been listening to Alien Robot Tiger. If you enjoyed this, consider subscribing to our Patreon for bonus content and access